Dave and Rebecca Brown, a couple married for 12 years, spent an hour and a half in their first three-way court-ordered consultation. Dave was only present because of his lawyer's insistence. Postnuptial agreements were a relatively new phenomenon in the legal system, and Dave's lawyer wanted all the dots over the I to be dotted and crossed out. The previous 90 minutes had been devoted to a conversation between the counselor and Rebecca, while Dave sat with compressed lips, with a notebook and pen. Periodically, he wrote something down in a notebook. Rebecca's pleas touched the heart of hardened counselor Jenny, who was also impressed by the way Rebecca accepted all the blame, dispelling all Dave's fears that her infidelity meant that he had let her down in some way. Rebecca also avoided many of the crappy excuses that people inevitably come up with in her situation. Jenny was glad that Rebecca followed this approach, as it was Jenny who recommended this approach when they met for a solo session 3 days before. Rebecca finally stopped talking. The only sounds in the room were the faint ticking of an analog clock on the wall to their side and the scratching of Dave taking notes on a notebook on his knee. Jenny let the silence drag on. Experience has taught her that most people like to fill in pauses in uncomfortable situations. 1 minute. 2. Jenny looked at Rebecca, who opened her mouth as if about to say something. Jenny shook her head slightly. Rebecca heeded the subtle sign and closed her mouth. Jenny decided to give Dave 1 more minute. If he kept quiet, Jenny was going to suggest that Dave seriously think about what his sincerely repentant wife was going through and let him in on the general statistics. Far from being once cheaters, always cheaters, those who were caught cheating and witnessed the devastation that cheating inflicted on those they cared about often became incredibly loyal. She was waiting. Dave stirred, a slight smile playing on his face. Good, Jenny thought, and the corners of her mouth turned up in a half-smile. It was usually better if she could get the injured party to contribute voluntarily rather than force them to do so. Well done, Rebecca. I'll give you 9 out of 10 for that. Jenny's smile disappeared. She was embarrassed, and judging by the look on Rebecca's face, she was embarrassed too. Jenny was the first to recover. So, Mr. Brown, there's no need to be rude. As you know, I met with her alone at the beginning of the week, and she is genuinely humbled that you caught her doing this, and very devastated by the pain she caused you. As she said today, her colleague was an experienced Lothario, and she just wasn't strong enough to resist his advances. I can assure you that with both your blessings, if you forgive her, I will be able to work with her to give her the strength and knowledge necessary to ensure that this never happens again. Dave just sighed. They say that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I don't take the hint, Mr. Brown. Are you saying that your wife cannot learn to protect herself and therefore your feelings in the future? No, not at all, Miss Parkinson. I mean, how long did you study at the university? For years? Actually, 6. I graduated from the master's degree. 6 years, yes, and you've obviously learned everything, damn it. Offended, Jenny straightened up. I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, that was rude and totally inappropriate. Do you think so? To forestall further protests, Dave pulled an electronic device out of his pocket and pressed a button. Rebecca's voice came from the device, begging for forgiveness. She swore it was a one-time mistake and that he, Dave, could take it to the bank. They listened as she admitted how much she had hurt him and how hurt she was that she had caused him so much pain, which she had witnessed. And then Jenny's indignant voice loudly interrupted. Do you understand how unpleasant and inappropriate it is to record our session? Not only is it unpleasant, but I believe that it is completely illegal in this state to record someone without their approval and consent, and I certainly do not intend to agree with this. It's okay, because Margaret agreed. Jenny was too angry and embarrassed to notice that Rebecca had just dropped her chin on her chest and was successfully pretending to be a beetroot. Jenny couldn't remember when she had been more offended. Who the hell is Margaret? She was our consultant 2 years ago, when I last caught Rebecca cheating. It was recorded then. My wife is a convincing bitch, isn't she? Fooled me then, that's for sure. Rebecca continued to stare at the floor at her feet. Dave watched with satisfaction as he and Jenny staged a silent competition to see who could blush the brightest. Annoyed, Jenny reflected on the thoroughness with which she had been fooled by an experienced cheater. Perhaps her embarrassment was tempered by the realization that the reason Rebecca was such a convincing liar was because the first person she convinced with her nonsense was Rebecca herself. Dave took advantage of the embarrassed silence of both women as an opportunity to end this farce. Just so there's no doubt about it, Rebecca, I will fully comply with the terms of the marriage agreement that you signed 2 years ago. And this means that you leave my house with only your personal belongings, while leaving all the jewelry that I bought you, including those 2 rings that you are currently wearing. Dave paused, allowing himself to replay his previous sentence in his head with satisfaction. In a way, I suppose I should thank you. If I had divorced you 2 years ago, the courts would have given you half of everything. And now you're not getting anything. And the only cost was that I had to swallow my pride for a while. Don't worry, you didn't hurt me much this time. Despite what a good counselor says, deep down I think I knew you would change again. And that's why I never really emotionally invested in our relationship again. Rebecca was silent, staring at the floor. The depth of punishment and loss still hadn't reached her. Jenny, embarrassed by her naivety, flinched at the cold dispassion with which Dave behaved. Obviously, he was actually emotionally unperturbed, as he claimed. Or he was an even better actor than his wife. Neither of the women said a word, and the offended husband continued. Give me 24 hours and I'll put your shit in a box. I don't really know where you're going or what you're going to do, but honestly, I don't care. The locks will be changed in an hour, so please don't embarrass us both by knocking on the door. If you try to mobilize your family and our friends against me, then the video clips that I have about you and your lover will mysteriously end up with everyone you know, and I really mean everyone. I'm sure at least some of them won't be so understanding when they hear you squeal like Clive used on our marital bed. Dave paused to stop the rapid buildup of his violent temperament. After a dozen deep breaths, he regained full control. As soon as the divorce is finalized, we can talk about your visit to Alice. Sign the divorce this week, and I'll be generous with visitation. Resist, and you can only kiss her goodbye. Jenny pricked up her ears at these words. Rebecca's head jerked up, and her eyes flashed with a mixture of fear and anger. Neither reaction escaped Jenny. Neither at their solo session, nor at this joint one, did Rebecca mention her daughter, but then she seemed like a typical narcissist of the 21st century, as self-centered as a spinning top, so fixated on what she could lose that everything and everything else faded into the background. Jenny looked back and saw the pain on Rebecca's face when she finally found the words. But, you can't take my little girl away from me. She needs me. I can't live without her. The unbearable pain that Rebecca felt from her future ex-husband's words was written on her distorted features. Jenny thought about it. If only these idiots had thought about all the consequences of their actions before committing their various crimes, I would have been out of a job. She reached out and put her hand on Rebecca's arm, hoping that she would keep from completely breaking down. Having shown himself to be an emotional dead fish in the eyes of the consultant, Dave spoke quite calmly. Maybe you should have thought about it before you were, quote, seduced by an expert, without quotes. All this is clearly stated in the contract. It says if you screw up again, you'll lose everything, including custody of Alice. But she needs me. Bullshit, Rebecca. She's 13 years old. I'll do just as well as you do. In any case, this is not the place to air our dirty laundry. You cheated. I took you back. You signed a contract after the wedding and promised never to go astray again. I suspected something was wrong, investigated, and caught you fooling around again. Don't commit a crime if you can't handle the consequences. Isn't that what they say? Dave stood up and looked down at his future ex-wife, who by this moment was kneeling on the floor with her hands clasped in supplication, tears streaming down her face. The look of anguish on her face showed everyone in the room that, perhaps for the first time in all this dirty business, she really felt remorse. The consequences of her impulsive actions have finally become apparent. With the last of her strength, Rebecca made a short dash. You're not taking my Alice. I will fight you every step of the way. The consultant stood as a helpless witness to the grin that appeared on Dave's face. Please do it. My lawyer told me that this is an ironclad agreement, and it will give me the excuse I need to release my little videos. Try to show yourself in public after they come out, Rebecca. With these words, the offended husband left the room. Jenny looked at the devastated woman and sighed. She'd better start now if she wants to prevent a complete mental collapse here, especially if the aforementioned contract is maintained in favor of her husband after the wedding. Having a daughter taken away from you must be every mother's nightmare. She bent over the sobbing woman. Dave Brown sat in his car until the adrenaline subsided and his breathing returned to normal. He then drove home through the supermarket and liquor store, buying a bottle of bourbon for himself and a nice piece of fish for dinner for him and Alice. Salmon was her favorite. Tonight was the beginning of a new phase in their life together. What he did tonight was important. He stopped with his hand on the handle of the front door, determined to stick to his usual daily routine as much as possible. For Alice's sake. Pushing open the door, Dave Brown spoke in a loud voice, well aware of Alice's growing hearing impairment. "Alice, walkie-talkies." An elderly fool jumped out of her basket and, wagging her tail so hard that her hind legs slipped on the floorboards, came up to greet her master.